Wolves. In Western culture, they are often used to symbolize danger and deceitfulness, as well as cruelty and viciousness. Meanwhile, in recent years, China's diplomacy has become more assertive, and this caught many around the world off guard. And to depict this in the most negative light, some Western journalists call it wolf warrior diplomacy. So the public will automatically fear and despise China, like they have been unconsciously conditioned to fear and despise wolves. I'm Andy Mock, a senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization and a commentator at China Global Television Network. Let's look at how they arrived at this term and why it matters. Wolf Warrior 2, what some call a Chinese version of Rambo, became the first film to gross more than $600 million at the Chinese box office and became the highest grossing non-English film of all time. It also gained global attention as China's entry for Best Foreign Language Film at the 90th Academy Awards. This movie was not only a smashing commercial success, but also heralded a China that was no longer weak and the victim of malign foreign forces. In China, many say, 中国站起来, 富起来, 强起来. And Wolf Warrior 2 became the emblem of this idea. Does this matter if Western media tries to portray Chinese diplomacy as dangerous, deceitful, and wicked? But as Confucius sagely observed thousands of years ago, calling things by their proper name is the beginning of wisdom. And if you care about geopolitics, nothing can be more valuable than getting wise about this important new development. President Xi Jinping has called for the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, and he has also called for China to strengthen its discourse power. In fact, these are closely related and may even make crucial contributions to the health and prosperity of the entire world. Let's find out why and the role that this so-called wolf warrior diplomacy is playing. First, let's take a look at this term, discourse power, or 话语权 in Chinese. This literally means the right to speak, or the right to be heard and taken seriously in a way commensurate with one's economic size and other objective measures. And while who has 话语权 or discourse power should simply depend on whose ideology and approach delivers the best results. But the current reality is a bit more complex. Since the end of the Second World War, the United States, as the only major country lucky enough not to have been an actual battleground, became a military and economic superpower and a cultural one. It was able to assert an almost unassailable right to speak on the global stage. Since then, the U.S. has used its discourse power to demonize, discredit, and delegitimize other ideologies, whether or not they were in fact more effective. And where this was not sufficient, it could also unleash its economic and military power to ruthlessly and brutally eliminate any perceived challenges to its dominance. And so, it is in this harsh and forbidding environment that China has sought to increase its right to speak and to be heard and taken seriously. China's quest for discourse power is also urgent, as some American politicians push the China threat theory that may be a prelude for a military attack against China, just like against Iraq. The story begins in 2008. While China has always believed in its approach, the great financial crisis erased any doubts China's leaders had about the advantages of the American-led system. You were my teacher, Wang Qishan told Hank Paulson in June 2008. Look at your system, Hank. We aren't sure we should be learning from you anymore. China needs to do three things to strengthen its discourse power. First, be more aggressive in setting the agenda. Second, shatter existing negative stereotypes. And finally, develop a more sophisticated understanding of foreign audiences. But this would be largely impossible as long as editors at Western media outlets, such as the New York Times, CNN, and others, could decide what was published, and more importantly, how these stories would be framed. But the gates to the Western media citadel started to crack on July 15, 2006, the day Twitter was officially launched. Journalists around the world quickly discovered that Twitter's real-time functionality was a de facto emergency communication system for breaking news. And of course, political leaders around the world discovered the power of Twitter too, with Donald Trump, who joined Twitter in 2009, one of the most notable and successful examples. For these reasons, journalists must be on Twitter, and political leaders too. Twitter, then, also could play a similar role in China's quest for discourse power. Zhao Lijian, a Chinese diplomat, joined Twitter in 2009 and became one of the first Chinese officials to do so. Since then, he has created a splash, with a major Western media outlet writing in 2019. The most interesting diplomat in the world these days may well be Zhao Lijian, the combative, bombastic, frankly Trumpy voice of the People's Republic of China on Twitter. Zhao is now Deputy Director General of the Foreign Ministry's Information Department, where he has also become the face of China's so-called wolf warrior diplomacy, with an ever-increasing number of his colleagues on Twitter telling China's story to the world. And so, we can see that the 2008 financial crisis validated China's assessment of the strength of its own system, while Twitter provided a way for it to circumvent Western media gatekeepers determined to block narratives that would undermine Western hegemony. Moreover, without the combative approach pioneered by Zhao, China's message would not capture the attention of journalists and opinion makers around the world and force them to revisit their outdated stereotypes and prejudices. But why is it so important for the world to better understand China's system? To understand why, we need to step back and look at the history of mankind, which can be understood as the journey from backwardness to modernity. In the modern era, we have witnessed the failure of the Soviet Union and the ideology and the system it embodied. There is a growing mountain of evidence to suggest that the American way also is failing. China's way, socialism with Chinese characteristics, is the third way. From China's role in mitigating the global financial crisis, which was a direct result of the flawed American system, to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the resilience and effectiveness of China's ideology and system. With billions around the world still on the journey to modernity, finding an effective path is crucial, as is avoiding the wrong ones. As a Chinese saying goes, listen to both sides and you will be enlightened. Why not lend an ear to China and find out the truth ourselves? China's quest for discourse power and the role played by Zhao Lijian and the other so-called wolf warriors is not just good for China. But as many still await the benefits of modernity, and the world faces daunting challenges like climate change, cybersecurity, and pandemics, an unbiased and open view to all approaches is vital. And this can only be achieved if China's voice is heard clearly all around the world.